first half of the year, we've seen a lot of activity in state-aided banks, but it's fair to say that the gravity of balance sheet management still weighs very heavily in on the sector. That is something which is likely to also continue for the foreseeable future. We've seen three real themes coming out. The first is the NPL management and disposals. The second theme we have seen is the divestment and disposal of non-core businesses. And the third that we've seen is states trying to sell down their ownership of state-aided banks. So a couple of the high-profile examples of that we've seen is the UK government's disposal of almost an 8% stake in RBS. The second we've seen, which has been very high-profile, is HSH Nordbank. And that was a sale and privatization of the bank, which went through right on the very last day of the deadline which was set by the European Commission for the privatization of that bank. We have also seen some very interesting rays of light, and one to note is the successful IPO of Arion Bank of Iceland. Now, Arion was the domestic assets, the good bank that was split out of Kaupthing Bank, which was one of the first big European bank failures in the global financial crisis. So a decade on, we've now seen the successful IPO of that bank, which is a great achievement. However, it has taken a decade to get there. Factors we're seeing which is driving activity in the state-aided bank sector include the desire for governments to offload their stakes in state-aided banks. The second thing that we're seeing which is driving in the sector is the adoption of IFRS 9. Now, this is an accounting standard which is coming into effect this year, which requires the earlier recognition of expected losses. And that is having a significant impact on the balance sheets of many of the banks, and particularly in the state-aided sector. One notable challenge is the increase in litigation. So in a number of the high-profile resolutions we've seen, for example, the resolution of Banco Popular at the end of last year, now as successful as that resolution was reported to be, it has attracted reportedly over 100 legal cases across the EU, which are still continuing. There is a question as to the extent that that might actually cause financial sponsors to think twice or to really look into matters with more diligence before actually leaping into M&A situations in the state-aided bank sector. In the second half of the year, we're likely to see much of the same. These state-aided banks remain vulnerable. Balance sheet management is everything. We're likely to see more NPL disposals and management, more focus on that. We're likely to see more disposals of any non-core businesses, and to the extent possible, and it can be done, governments selling more stakes in the state-aided banks to recoup those public funds, but it will only be in circumstances where stability is not at risk.